Ajaan Jia was born in an exceptionally auspicious time for authentic Buddhist practice. By virtue of his karmic background, it was almost inevitable that he would meet with the right conditions to further his spiritual progress. The early to mid-20th century was arguably one of the most remarkable periods of Buddhist practice in the entire modern era. Led by Ajaan Sao and Ajaan Mun, with their revival of traditional Buddhist training methods, generations of Thai forest monks benefited from a renewed emphasis on strict discipline and time-honored ascetic practices to attain the highest Dhamma in an age when such an accomplishment was no longer thought possible. Prior to this period of revival, a popular opinion held that it was no longer possible to attain Nibbāna. The best that could be expected of Buddhists in the modern era was that they faithfully observe moral precepts and steadfastly preserve Buddhist rituals. As a result of that conviction, the quality of monastic discipline had seriously deteriorated, and authentic Buddhist meditation practices had been all but abandoned. Seeing the danger to the monastic traditions posed by this regression in monastic discipline, influential Thai monks spearheaded a reform movement in the 19th century that resulted in the formation of a new Thai monastic order called the Dhammayut Nikaya. One guiding principle of this new order was strict adherence to the Buddha's monastic code of conduct, or Vinaya. The insistence on strict compliance with the disciplinary rules at Dhammayut monasteries attracted the likes of Ajaan Sao and Ajaan Mun to ordain and prosper in this monastic lineage. In addition to strict discipline, the other principle that would set these two great teachers apart from their contemporaries was a renewed emphasis on the value of Dhutanga ascetic practices recommended by the Buddha. This radical shift from a sedentary monk's respectable but unadventurous lifestyle to the rigorous austerities practiced daily by a wandering Dhutanga monk became a turning point for re-establishing faith in the possibility of attaining the ultimate goal of the Buddha's teachings. Under Ajaan Mun's guidance, forest Sangha communities were able to maintain the integrity of their communal spirit by emphasizing respect for traditional Buddhist values, while at the same time granting a measure of autonomy to individual monks by encouraging each to experiment with the Dhutanga practices that best suited their temperament. The ascetic practices encouraged by the Buddha exert an intensified pressure on the attachments that create suffering. The criteria for deciding whether a practice should be adopted or not is how defiantly its use counteracts the power that the defilements exert on one's mind. The Dhutanga monks of the Thai forest tradition who practiced these ascetic methods proved that, practiced correctly with their original intent, the Buddha's teachings were still capable of leading a person who applied the right intention, the right attitude, the right mindfulness, and the right effort to attain the right result. Indeed, it was often the ascetic practices undertaken as aids to meditation that were instrumental in instilling the rightness in those path factors. Such concerted opposition to the excesses of craving, aversion, and delusion is what the Buddha meant by the middle way. The Buddha stated that the middle way refers to the path of practice that is neither too lax nor too extreme. In other words, just right. But just right for what? Just right to counter the mental defilements in whichever way they manifest. If the defilements are strong, the forces of Dhamma required to overcome them must be equal to the task. Then the forces of Dhamma must adjust their tactics and take courageous action to intensify their attack and drive the defilements back to the brink of total submission. This is the middle way in action. The forces of goodness battle the forces of evil by employing the most appropriate meditation practices for the occasion, the ones optimally suited to counter the strength of the opposition at each juncture in the battle until Dhamma finally emerges victorious. Among Dhutanga monks intent on confronting the most resistant defilements, the Dhutanga spirit they espoused spawned a variety of closely aligned ascetic practices. For fearless and intrepid monks like Ajaan Jia and his companions, these alternative observances became an indispensable part of intensifying their meditation for the purpose of tackling the most deeply entrenched defilements head-on with a winner-takes-all mentality. Ajaan Jia praised the exploits of Dhutanga monks who, rather than settling for slow and steady progress, challenge themselves by choosing to confront hardship and fear directly as a means of intensifying their efforts in meditation. He admired many of Ajaan Mun's disciples for the innovative ways in which they broadened the scope of traditional Dhutanga asceticism. Whenever their minds were gripped by fear, or whenever they felt drowsy, complacent, or discouraged, they devised and put into practice uniquely appropriate strategies that forced them to confront these problems in a way that demanded a quick and decisive resolution. It was their dedication to ascetic practices that hardened them into Dhamma warriors who possessed the unwavering courage to face dangerous and painful situations for the sake of ridding their minds of suffering. As a result, disciples of Ajaan Mun who practiced in wilderness areas tended to make a special effort to seek out frightening locations to stimulate their meditation practice. Noticing that tigers regularly used a certain forest trail at night, such monks made a point of sitting on the ground right in the middle of that path. Some monks frequented village charnel grounds where corpses were cast away and wild animals were known to scavenge at night. Those monks who had an ingrained fear of ghosts deliberately spent nights meditating at cremation grounds deep in the forest in order to conquer that debilitating fear. Others, feeling lethargic, meditated while seated precariously on narrow ledges that extended over steep, rocky precipices, intending to take advantage of their fear of death to awaken concentration and arouse vigilance. The concentrated awareness that was achieved by all these innovative practices induced a state of increased alertness. That heightened awareness soon gathered into a single point of focus, which caused the mind to rapidly converge to a point of sublime stillness. In an instant, the mind was oblivious to all the fear and trepidation that had previously engulfed it. In place of these hindrances, a serene, knowing essence arose, an awareness of pure, harmonious being so profound as to be indescribable. When the mind withdrew from that state, fear of death was often a thing of the past. It had been superseded by an incredible sense of courage, the likes of which had never before been experienced. In the absence of that element of fear, the restless mind was reluctant to drop into the desired state of calm. Consequently, where Dhamma warriors sat in meditation on each occasion depended on the location where they felt the mind was most likely to quickly reach deep levels of samadhi. The Buddha compared the difficulties experienced on the path of practice to the arduous spiritual journey of a monk which eventually leads him to the banks of a mighty river that separates him from the land of freedom at the far shore. To attempt the crossing, he must construct a sturdy raft and pilot it skillfully with ingenuity, fortitude, and stamina. The raft is fashioned from the Dhamma practices taught by the Buddha, which the monk must diligently put to the test in his effort to complete the journey. He adapts the materials he uses to build the raft to the purpose of countering the hazards he expects to face on the river. From the many meditation methods that the Buddha taught, the monk chooses a set of practices that are uniquely suited to the mission. Supported by the raft while paddling deftly with his hands and feet, he feels confident he can eventually reach freedom's shore. A meditative life practiced for the purpose of attaining freedom from suffering resembles paddling a raft against the prevailing current of birth and death. If a practitioner does not tenaciously resist the current's momentum, he will soon find himself drifting sideways down the stream following the flow of continued existence, and thus never reach the ultimate safety of Nibbāna's shore. Fierce, unwavering determination must be maintained with every kick and stroke to prevent his mind from veering off course. Relying on the raft's stability to anchor concentration, a practitioner negotiates the needs and demands of crossing the mighty river, adjusting the mind to whatever obstructions it encounters. The mind moves through the perceptions of its awareness, like the river water coursing beneath the raft, flowing over fears and under cravings, around attachments and through delusions. It adapts its attention to the forms and moods of the hindrances it encounters on the journey, becoming sometimes deep, sometimes shallow, sometimes infused with light, and other times lost in shadow. constantly gathering insights to resolve conflicts between the defiance of defilements and the principles of Dhamma. The practitioner pushes on, neutralizing strong headwinds and powerful undercurrents at every juncture of his passage. Once the Dhutangas and other practices that constitute the raft have accomplished their mission, he abandons them at freedom's shoreline because they are no longer needed. Only then is he fully prepared to step off the raft and onto solid ground. We can imagine Ajaan Jia emerging from the wilderness, rooting his feet firmly on the river's bank and staring with fierce and uncompromising determination at his destination on the opposite shore. Having carefully assessed what is required to make the crossing, he improvises a raft from materials that are available on the jungle floor. Cobbling together logs, branches, roots, and vines, and rigging them with a sail stitched together from threadbare monk's robes, he boldly pushes off from the bank and into the current of the mighty river. Strong headwinds soon push the raft off course, tearing the sail to shreds in the process. In response, Ajaan Jia strips off his shoulder cloth and sets to work paddling vigorously until he finds a way to steady the raft and regain the advantage. With diligent attention to detail, he learns to read the river and tame its shifting currents. During the crossing, he endures stretches of torrential rain, blazing heat, and freezing temperatures. But he becomes so absorbed in the challenge that he forgets the conditions, forgets to sleep, and forgets to eat. Piloting his craft with only his arms and legs, Ajaan Jia advances undeterred until he arrives triumphantly at the far shore. Totally unfettered at last, he abandons the raft at the water's edge and steps to the ground, planting his bare and blistered feet firmly on terra firma, in the land of absolute freedom. The end.